Hello, and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium, the weird little patron spinoff where we talk about books that Craig and the crew haven't gotten around to yet. I'm Little Red Book, and I have with me Colonel Rabbit
Hello.
and Todd of the Legendarium.
Howdy.
Tonight we will be discussing The Hallowed Hunt by Lois McMaster Bujold. It is the third book in the Five Gods series, but interestingly takes place 500, we don't know exactly how many hundreds of years before the Curse of Chalion. Gentlemen, how would you rate this book on a scale of 1 to 5?
1 to 5 swords, 1 to 5 hearts, 1 to 5 spectral, 1 to 5 gods.
We'll say stars.
Okay. I would probably give it a 3.75. Not quite a 4. Not quite a 4 for me.
Rabbit.
I would probably go with just over 4. Somewhere between 4 and 4.5.
Rabbit has a cat.
I was going to say, did you sprout a tentacle? That's awesome.
I wish. Actually, I probably don't wish. That would be kind of terrifying.
So I would give it 4 stars, I think. It is my least favorite of the 3.
Oh, okay.
And but this reading has improved my opinion of it. When
Same
I was
for me
reading
as
to
well.
review it, yeah, I got some different takes. But it also has some of my favorite quotes from this series in it.
I'd buy that.
So that's a thing. We'll get into that. So were you surprised at being transported back in time? Or Todd, did you even realize you were?
I did. I was completely lost. Totally lost for like the first. Yeah, it was probably 12 minutes ago that I put together that I was that it was earlier than the last books that we had read. Largely because you said transported back in time. So yeah, I just was I was sitting there thinking, this is a lot different than the magic stuff that we had last time. So, but I'll just hang in there. I'll ride along and see what happens. And that's kind of how it ran.
Yeah, and this is why I recommend reading in publishing order, because each of the new books introduces a new magic system, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about you, Rabbit?
I mean, I think the first time I read this, you had told me that it was back in time.
Oh, okay, so that ruins it.
I already knew. So I was like, yes. The only thing that was about it is it's an all new cast of characters. Like I don't. There's hardly even any reference in the previous 2 books to the characters and the events in this book. So there's not really any like lifeline to grasp.
No,
I guess
really
Chalion is mentioned, but like other than that,
and Darthica.
Darthica, and I think the countries are the same, but like other than that,
I think Darthica might be the Roman Empire, but I'm not sure.
The analog.
I was thinking about that. Anyway, yeah, an analog. I was shocked when I picked up this book the first time, but I can't remember what my thoughts were because that was 15 years ago. So I don't know exactly what my thoughts were.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the tone of this book? Because it feels like a shift, at least for me. I don't know if you felt like the tone shifted from the other books.
For me, it felt very and maybe part of it's because I as I've mentioned many times, I do the audiobooks, and so with the narrator being the same narrator, it had a very familiar feel from that standpoint. It felt more gritty in places, much less refined, and so that was one of the things that to me was a little different. And maybe it's because so much of it was told from Ingray's perspective, from a male perspective. She was working very hard, and Ingray felt like a scoundrel more than a hero. And I wondered if that was part of what she was trying to impart with some of the changes in the way that she did some of the writing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because You haven't read the first book, I realize.
Correct.
Kaz is a peaceful man. He just gets
Yeah.
thrown into violent situations, whereas Ingray is definitely a man of violence.
hmm
Yes.
I mean, even at the very beginning, like even says, like, I'm not an honorable man either. Like, I'm willing to accept bribes if the reason is good.
Right. And it's a real shift because he is genuinely kind of a bad guy. I mean, not bad. He's
Relative to most fantasy heroes, he's much more morally great. And then, well, I guess there's the whole grimdark genre, which is that, but
it's not
like,
grimdark, but it
but has a much more gray hero than a protagonist than
sure.
a lot of fantasy does.
Right.
I like
think
that.
the other-
Describing him as a green hero. I like that.
The other big shift for me was the core romance of the book was much more in the front than with the other two.
I have thoughts about that, but we're going to talk about that later.
I mean, I'm not talking about like how well it's done. I'm just saying it was much more a part of the story and a part of everything than in Paladin of Souls or Curse of Chalian.
Yeah, it's much more of a romance novel as opposed to a
Right.
book with a love story.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my friends asked me what I was reading, and I said, I'm reading something very different. They said, oh? I said, yeah, it's a Harlequin romance with a magic system. And they said, oh? And then they looked at me and they said, how many Harlequin romances have you read, Todd? And I said,
That is exactly what I was thinking.
Do most Harlequin romances have magic systems?
only one. This one.
This is not. Todd, I'm going to have to send you some Harlequin romances because I don't think you really understand how that works.
You know, probably that's a good thing.
Okay, this is going to be a fraught question because I have some serious issues with the setup of this novel. But I just want to know, from a male perspective, talking the first 3 chapters, what do you think of the setup?
Are you talking about the
I'm talking about the killing
murder
of the
and rape?
prince. Yeah, that.
You should
That's
say
what
that
I'm
right.
talking about.
We got to say it eventually.
It's not murder. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Technically, murder implies
it would be manslaughter.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-mm.
Call it what you will.
It was self-defense. Is my
Well, right, but isn't that still legally classified as manslaughter? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not gonna.
Era.
All I
Era,
know
get
is
on
that
this.
they didn't make that distinction.
Anyways, the prince was killed as he attempted to rape Ajara.
Yeah, and that makes while conducting an arcane ceremony ritual for the investiture of an animal. Wow! I mean, all these things happening at once. It was kind of like I was
How awful can you make one event?
Yeah, I'm like, how? When did this happen? What? I did have to reread or re-listen to a few things. I was like, did I get that right? Yep, I got that right. Okay, well, okay, whatever.
And it's especially kind of strange because, like, you're from Ingray's perspective. You're learning about this all from Ingray's perspective, who like had no association with the events. So it's like it's not like you're even living it. It's not like a big action scene that like you see Jada defending herself. It's just like you're just like, oh, okay, this is where we're starting.
Especially when they said, "Oh yeah, she clubbed him with a warhammer," and I'm sitting there thinking, "She clubbed him with a warhammer? Holy crap! What? I mean." I was thinking she killed him with, special No, just a straight up bludgeoning with a warhammer. Okay, well, good.
To be fair, she only hit him. What, it was twice, or was it 3 times? Twice, yeah. Like that's and both were like reasonable hits. It wasn't like she kept on hitting him after he was down.
She's not pounding him. It's
Yeah,
like mincemeat. It is a good setup, and it is That was straight up self-defense. It just was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do think for the time period and the political situation, it's appropriate. But I am viscerally angry the entire time I am reading about the trial and about this whole setup because I'm like, this poor girl got sent into a room and locked in with this maniac that everybody knows is a maniac. But
Mhm.
because he's a prince and she's a minor lady, and the fact that
Yep.
that his sister did that to her, like I said, it makes sense in the setting that the story takes place in, but
It's not enjoyable.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I can get it. I can get behind
Yeah.
that.
And the fact that like the whole time you almost being bludgeoned with the fact that like knowledge that without some sort of intervention or legal finesse, she is going to be sentenced
Mhm.
to be guilty. Right?
Right.
Like in unless extenuating circumstances or bribes or something happens, by the moral and legal code, she would be guilty of that crime.
Well, and the other thing that was kind of interesting is as Ingray's trying to unravel all of these things, he comes to the conclusion that even if she can be acquitted for the death, found innocent for the death of the prince.
I think we might be getting a little close to spoilers. So let's
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
There's a piece of that as he unravels it, she's in a no-win situation.
Yep. And it's really frustrating and I'm not someone to say these things should not be portrayed in literature because I think that those are stories that need to be told, I guess. And at the same time, Injata is a incredibly brave and strong woman, and I love her and admire her. She's not my favorite character, but I get it. So, are we ready to move into spoilers?
Yep.
Sure.
How many tries is it gonna take me to read the summary I wrote?
I can go with one.
Okay.
You nailed the introduction first try.
I know, that's because we talked about a whole bunch of other stuff before so I could get my giggles under control. Ingray Ken Wolfcliffe is summoned to Prince Palazzo's hunting lodge to investigate his murder. He's in exile for murdering a servant. Kinda. The murderer in question is the Lady Ijada de Castos, who claims that it was an act of self-defense. She confesses to being haunted by the spirit of a leopardess and is seeking help from the notoriously wolf-haunted Ingray. There are incidents with sorcerer doctors, petty saints, Viking princes, a judge of the father, a polar bear, and a new employer in Kenhorse River. The Princess Farrakhan Stagthorn, Indige's former employer, and Ingray are kidnapped by her husband and go on a mad ride to Indige's dowry land called the Haunted Wood. Ingray is followed by Inja, a saint, a judge, a former saint, and two princes. They all encounter a bizarre rite that ends in the haunting of the woods, a marriage, and the ending of a tiny kingdom, only 12 square miles, but 4 centuries deep. How'd I do?
Pretty good.
A couple of the names got a little bit butchered, but all in all, pretty good.
The names are the worst. How do you feel about the cynicism of Ingray versus the naivete of Injata? And is this even a fair way to describe their worldviews?
I think naivete is a good description for Ijada when at the outset. I'm not sure she's moved much from that by the time things are done. I think she stays pretty. She's still pretty innocent of many things all the way through the book. She keeps thinking that things are going to be okay because it was self-defense. Well, not necessarily. And Ingray's, I like that you call it cynicism, and he's cynical just not just of the situation, but he's cynical of himself too. He's very beaten down, I think, by all that he has experienced and all that has gone wrong around him. They are nice counterpoints to each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I was rereading this after I wrote this question, so I have I'm not sure. I don't think she's a little naive, but I think it might be a conversation between faith and materialism. Does that make sense? And that's not even the right way to put it.
I mean, she's naive, but I think it's more of like if you want like a single black and white word to describe the characters, naive and cynical would be good ones, but like they're not great descriptors. It's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if
And she's
because
not
she's
completely Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say she's not completely naive. I mean, when you look at her life, her dad died, her mom got remarried, her mom died, and she's basically an orphan living in her stepmother's house and who's like 3 years older than her.
What
Yeah,
about
yeah.
describing her as having just like having faith? Because like that's really what it's more about. Is like she's more about having faith that things will work out as they should or as is right. The gods or people or whoever will step in and say, yes, you were right to defend yourself. We'll get this all sorted out. Yes,
Is it
I'll
kind of a
deal with.
Cinderella syndrome?
I'm sorry?
Is it kind of a Cinderella syndrome?
I don't think that's right either. She has this very interesting moment when she's talking to Ingray about the leopard spirit coming into her, and she said, "I've been praying to the son of Autumn my entire life, and he came for the leopard. He didn't come for me." And this is at the very beginning of the story. And
I
so,
missed that.
I mean, I've read the book about 6 times, so there's that.
Yeah, I guess from a literary standpoint, they are well balanced against each other. I don't know. I think you can plumb the depths of both of their perspectives and come up with different ways of describing it. But from a literary standpoint, I think they make a nice they make a nice oppositional pairing.
Yeah, they're in conversation with each other about their different perspectives, so to speak.
Mhm. And do you think it's fair to say that they both move as a result of their experience with each other?
I would say Ingray moved more than she did,
Okay.
but they did both move. So Injata doesn't become uncynical sorry, cynical, but she becomes more pragmatic,
Yeah,
maybe is the right word?
it's difficult to see like that. Like I understand what you're saying. It's difficult to see that much change in Najada because of how overwhelming Ingray's presence is with his own cynicism.
Right.
Right? Like you could say a lot of her change is in agreeing with Ingray when he says cynical things, and it doesn't feel like that much of a change. A, because Ingray has been saying it all this time, and B, because well, he's right most of the time.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, that's
so it's like
that's
it.
too.
So it doesn't feel like that much like of a huge character moment. It wasn't like at the beginning she was like, "No, I deny all cynicism." It was and then she's like, okay, yeah, I'm super cynical. I'm just like Ingray. It's like, no, it's just like she just saw that Ingray was right, which is like, yeah,
But she was too.
sure.
She was right.
Yeah.
She was right that in the end, some things will resolve. She had faith that that the people working for the gods, would help sort things out.
She was right in the sense that the gods were involved because they are very actively involved.
Mhm.
I think this character has the most encounters with
Godly,
gods. Yeah,
most godly experiences per book.
right. Yeah, godly experiences per book.
Yeah, I think
Because
it's
there
got
was
it.
something bigger at Ingray's looking at the political needs of the situation, and Jada is like, "No, the gods are worried about this other thing
Right.
that's
Yeah.
way, way bigger." 'Cause she
Yeah.
wants to run off and go to her woods, and, "We figured out how to solve the problem with the spirits and stuff. We need to do that right now." And he's like, "No, no, no, no." But she was right in the sense that is what was most important. Getting back to the fraught things, what's the name of his lieutenant?
The life of me either.
It begins with a
Jessica?
G.
It
Gaskra,
was,
yeah, that's
yeah,
correct. Um, Only you would fall in love with a woman who would bludgeon her lover to death.
I,
And then Ingray says, "Only one lover."
yeah,
I'm like, "He wasn't a lover!" Like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, this quote makes me feel so weird. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I just am curious of your thoughts, your reactions.
I mean, I had the exact same reaction as you. Just like, I don't think he was a lover.
And I found it. I found that perhaps one of the most. Uh, I laughed out loud when I heard that because it's an indication of how close these two men have been, and how many bad choices has Ingray made. Oh, probably Geska knows them all.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
but also like Ingrid doesn't make that many like logically bad choices. Of it. If I want, like, I don't know if logical is the right word, but like
No, it is.
he like Ingrid doesn't make like what we would generally classify as bad decisions a lot.
No, what he makes is ruthless decisions.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. I think that's more. Yeah, it's not about uh Ingrid making like what we would call silly or airhead
Right,
decisions.
yeah.
It's about like Ingray being a violent man
Yeah, he's not
and falling
dumb.
in love with the quote unquote violent girl.
Rabbit, you have explained that better to me than any other person has. And I've thought about this book a lot. So, how do you think there's a lot of exposition dumps in this book. Todd, how do you think about those?
I wrote a short story a while back, and one of the comments that I got back was there was a huge info dump at 2/3 of the way in, and I thought, oh yeah, I guess there was. Whenever I come across those, I find myself asking, could we have done this differently? Could we have done this in a way that would have been more organic? I would have loved. For me, I got really lost in some of in some of the historical pieces, and all of the setup for the battle. Okay, yeah, it was useful and it was necessary, but the way that it was handled, from this standpoint of everybody knew blah 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 blah, and I'm like, no, everybody doesn't know this. I have no idea what you're talking about, and it was harder for me to follow. So that's part of why I was a 3.75 stars, is because there were some places where um, I know what she was doing. It just really was hard for me to follow some of those pieces.
That's very fair because like I have just been reading some of the novellas, the Penrick and Desmond novellas that are, I guess, publishing order after this, and anyways, they have like a lot of that information, a lot of information about shamanic knowledge um and sorcerer's magic and the gods. So like I already had that refresher, so I didn't like that. What those info dumps were like, yeah, okay, that I know that I know that. It's the opposite of what you're saying. It's like I do know this, not no, I do not know this. So I think that definitely helped my enjoyment of it this read through. I think I did the opposite of increasing my rating as it would have been for a previous read through.
The info dumps are one of the reasons I don't like this book, but I don't know how she would make them different to make this. Well, I mean, I'm not a author, right? Like all that information is 100% necessary. There's got to be a better way of doing it than like a mind meld from Horse River. I don't know. The
Yeah,
whole
no, I get what you're
thing,
saying.
it
You
just,
did Todd, you did. Okay.
yeah, I just
Yeah,
don't.
as a literary device, I think there were some options that were available to her that maybe she just didn't know how to approach. For instance, she could have approached it from a standpoint um, of a mystery thriller kind of a situation where Ingray needed to go get more information, and in that case, getting the information, she could have parceled that out with, oh, he found this piece of information out from one person, and then he goes to somebody else for that for more detail. A little bit like he did with Learned Luco and with Osment. Those two individuals gave some different pieces that she could have done the same thing with some of the info dump that she did about what shaman what role shaman and standard bearers played, and all of the historical information around the battle. Those could have been handled through some other literary devices. I just think that for whatever reason she made a choice, and I respect the choice, but it made it hard for.
Yeah, that's
I did
that's.
not respect the choice, and I love her. She's my queen.
I mean, to be fair, like the mind meld, like the idea of it was like is cool. Like, and that could have been part of the information, but like the whole tension of that scene was undermined by the fact that there was an expedition jump.
This is why I've read this book least in the series.
Yeah.
And that includes the novellas. Like I read Penrick way more than I've read this book. It's
Rick's my favorite, but
Penrick is amazing. Anyhow, we all know what my favorite one is. So anything else before we head into like favorite characters and scenes and quotes?
I have one thing that that I that I really I didn't enjoy it at first, but I gradually began to really enjoy the introduction of the shaman mysticism piece, as being something that was, I think they described it as very old magic,
Mm-hmm.
and this idea that it predated their predated even their religion. That before there were the gods, there was still this shaman magic that was kicking around, and and maybe that's not exactly how it was portrayed or was supposed to be portrayed, but it's how it came across to me, and I really appreciated that as a. I didn't think I would, but I really grew to appreciate that as a piece of this. Um, yeah, and that's all I'll say on that, because there's a favorite scene that I'm going to get to, that I'm going to talk about some other things that I have some comparisons to.
So I was gonna say, in regards to the shaman magic, is there's a blood sacrifice required? I just thought that was really cool.
yeah,
Not that I'm into sacrificing.
well, it's not
You know what
blood
I mean.
sacrifice, isn't like you have to murder somebody, but like the power comes from your own blood or something's blood. So you can get like, so when you use power, you get like a nosebleed or a cut starts bleeding again when it should be healing, or
It's very reminiscent of the Eucharist in a lot of ways. At least I think it is. So apparently I'm
I can
alone.
see similarities.
I don't know. I don't know what the Eucharist is, so I can't comment.
Communion.
No,
Mhm.
I am not religious
I
at
know.
all.
I know. Todd gets me. Todd understands what I'm saying.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so favorite characters. I'm gonna go first. I have two, and my first is Helena. She is just amazing.
Yep.
She's so smart, and she just I can't say enough about her. Her plucky, just take me as I am attitude towards life, and the way she manipulates people around her, but not in a bad way. She doesn't do it in a bad way, but she definitely
She
nudges
guides
people.
them.
And her husband says the gods walk through her dreams. And it's just not fair.
One of the things that I liked about her, Osmond and her, was when he said, I was on the road for a day before I realized that she sent me away to end the argument so that I couldn't argue with her anymore.
Yep, and couldn't
Not that
stop
he
her from
won.
leaving. And yeah, he realized he'd lost because now she's just going to come on her own. That was a fantastic one.
And then he's like, do you happen to know what hotel she's taken rooms in?
Because it's just like her to, find some random person and tell them to tell her husband.
Yes. Okay.
Also,
Rabbit.
just to continue from Penrick and Desdemona, if you like Anna, read Penrick and Desdemona.
I agree. So, Rabbit, who's your favorite character?
I was going to go with your second choice, which is Prince Jogel.
Oh, I love
And
him.
actually, kind of like with an asterisk on that, the beautiful Braiga. Like, she's got to be like one of the best characters that like never sees a moment of screen time. Like, we don't know, she doesn't exist as like she could be all in Prince Jogel's imagination, but like it's just all the descriptions of who she is and what she's done is just fantastic.
Well, he asked her to marry him because she saved his horses from being stolen.
Yeah.
Okay, Todd.
So I'm not sure I had a favorite character. I think they all were. I actually have to admit that I think Horse River was really a fun character to read or to listen.
Right.
The depth of and part of it was that obviously there's this tremendous bitterness and anger and vengefulness and all these kinds of things, but also the scene where we get the indication, part of that info dump we were talking about all of these lives that have been lived, trying to set right what has gone. I think that the characterization of that was very compelling. And the one moment that, and maybe this is getting into favorite scenes, but it was a moment with Horse River when Ingray's like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you want? And he says, what I want, I can never have. Say again.
I want my world back.
Yeah.
I want to grow old. I want to see my children laugh. And everybody knows me, or maybe they don't, but if they don't, now they know. That's, there's always at least one spot in a book where I start to bawl, and that was it. And I was just like, oh, you know what? You're a horrible human being, but I get it.
I am proud to say I did not cry once reading this book, but that's probably because I cried all the other times I read this book.
So you're 1 for 6.
A thing happened. I didn't cry. I might cry when we read our quotes. Todd, favorite scene?
So I had it's more of a favorite. I don't want to call it a favorite trope, but it was a favorite thematic piece. It starts with Fafa. When Fafa is going crazy, and Ingray looks at him and says, "Down," and he says he pulls this voice from down inside him, and I have all these things going on in my head, and then he does it with Kiska, and he does it with, he says, "Stop," and Kiska's like, "Oh," all these kinds of things. And as I'm reading that or listening to that, I said to myself, "Oh, they even called it the weirding way. Dune comes back into my mind, and the voice and all these kinds of things." I mean, I'm a sci-fi guy, and so that was my first thought was, oh, yeah, okay, well, I've experienced this before. So that was, but the Fafa scene in particular, where he's like, and then when he has to explain it later, so did you do anything miraculous?
Weird.
Yeah, not that I know of. Was there anything uncanny about what you did? What do you mean by uncanny? Yeah, he was very, very deftly avoiding saying yes or no. Just all this, all of this double talk of saying, how much can I avoid saying anything?
Yeah.
So
He even
it
he
starts
even
with
says
Fafo and
that
it kind of
at one
continues.
point. Yeah. He's like,
Yeah.
who have I not told a thing to?" Rabbit?
I mean, the cheap answer would be almost any scene with Hana in it. Just because like she just makes every scene with her in it is great. But one other amusing one that is kind of like thematic for the whole book was towards the beginning when they're traveling and they get Ajada and Ingray get swept by the fjord or on
Oh, that's
um,
good. Yeah,
right
on the
and
river.
he's like and he dives in to save her and ends up wait she can swim and I can't and she ends up saving his life
And
as
he
he's
has this
trying to kill her.
Yeah, exactly. He has this voice in his head saying, push her down," and then he's like, "No, wait, I'm supposed to be saving her, and I can't swim, by the way."
And that whole conversation afterwards was just such a fantastic scene.
So, I think my favorite scene is the one where they're in the inn and Helana roots out the Gias? Is that how you say that word? How do you say that word? Okay.
Yes, Gesh,
Yeah,
guys.
she pronounced it Gaius in the narration.
Yeah, so I think that's my favorite scene, but a very close second is the scene where they're in the wood and Ingray is blessing all the ghosts and releasing them, and they walk up to the and they walk up to their the avatars of their gods, and they get to go home, and they've been stuck in the forest for like 400 years or whatever. They finally get to go home. Their watch is done.
And with the standard bearer being the last one there at the end of everything,
And then
paying witness.
Yeah, and Ingray and Injata jump over the pole, the standard bearer's pole. So, anyway, sorry about that.
No, don't ever apologize. That was my same feeling of and especially when they talked about when she talked about different ones that came forward and and he could sense in them different levels of apprehension. Some of them weren't sure. Some of them, and when they got to the end, and they found some that just they were done. They had suffered enough, and so they didn't even want to. They didn't want to accept the gift. When he said and part of that whole time, um, when he finally then gets to Wenzel, and he
Oh,
looks at
man.
Horse River, and he says, "What do I? How do I do this for you?" And he gets this feeling that the word is mercy. What a powerful moment that was. You're not alone. What a powerful moment that was to recognize that even he deserved a measure of mercy for all
Yeah.
that he had endured. A really powerful and beautiful scene.
Especially set up from the previous one where he had to take the
Cleanse
spirits
the
out of the
prince.
prince's
Yeah.
soul, and he said, I don't want to do it," but it was Ajada that said, "Then do it for
Mhm.
me."
The part where she says, "Yes, I took his life. I don't wanna take eternity from him." Yeah, it was very, very powerful, and it reminds me of, well, a bunch of things that are all biblical, but we're just gonna reference the series where Kazrael is burning the body of the guy who did the death magic he asks for mercy from all of the gods. He says, not justice, mercy. Because we all need more mercy in our lives, as far as I'm concerned. Well, maybe you guys don't. I do.
You can never have too much.
In fact, for me, one of the difficulties I had as I was reading the book is that I'm always looking for level 3 kinds of things. How do I become a better person? How is this helping me be a better human being? How can I better handle the challenges that life is going to throw at me because I'm reading this book? And it wasn't until the very end that I felt like I was getting the things that I look for in this book. It was a long setup for a very brilliant moment of this idea, all of us deserve a little more mercy. So for me, that there was finally a payoff. It took a while. It took a while. That's probably the other reason why I give it about a 3.75.
It's not her best work, but I still love it. But it's not her best work.
Yeah.
Favorite scenes? Has everyone gone?
Mhm.
Okay, so quotes.
So I have two,
I have
and
three.
they're both from the and there's some other ones that are kind of neat, but these were two that spring. And he says it was during the vision where Ingray was purging the animal spirits so that the prince, whatever his bucket was, prince really bad dude.
Prince
Which I'm
Rapist.
sure is all right. Yeah, Prince Rapist. There we go. When he says it is unjust, whispered Ingray, unfair to all who would try to do rightly. But I am not the god for justice, murmured the son. Would you both stand before my father instead? What a chilling kind of a moment that for me at least, it gives this view of the way that this religious system works, that there is a very clear, depending on who you will go to, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
And the other one
Yeah.
was along that same lines. The sun held up his hands, luminescent. They seemed as if dappled by autumn. And he says, my grace flows from these as a river, Wolf Lord. Would you have me dole it out in exact measure that men earn, as from an apothecary's dropper? That big piece, this big idea of how important this is, was really powerful. And Colonel Rabbit, your cat, obviously appreciated that as well. Walking in front of the screen,
Of course,
exactly that.
she appreciated everything you just said. At
Um,
least she didn't show you her butt.
so I'm going to read my funny one, and then I'm going to let Rabbit go, and then I'm going to read my two serious ones. So this is at the very beginning of the novel, and it is an example of why I love her writing. The dray horses seemed the only cheerful members of the party, fresh and ponderously frisky, and apparently regarding the jaunt as some horse holiday. I don't know if you guys have ever been around dray horses, but think Budweiser horses. And the idea of them being ponderously frisky, it's just so great. I love it. I love her writing so much.
So I think mine is actually almost a scene, but it was the scene talking, or the Oswald quote talking about how Helena outfoxes him. And there's definitely better lines, definitely better quotes in this book, but I'm just such a sucker for good dialogue, good wordplay. That's just like it just stuck out to me as being such a fantastic line.
So this is a quote that gets repeated in the Penrick books. And Ingray is standing before the seal master. And he says, the gods have no hands in this world but ours. If we fail them, where can they turn? And that's that makes me feel like very small. And I know it's not supposed to make you feel small, it's supposed to make you feel the opposite, but
I think it's also some variant of that is in Hallowed Hunt as well.
no, that is in Hallowed Hunt. It's
Or,
quoted,
no,
and
Paladin of Souls. Ah,
there is some version of it, yes, that's in
yes,
Paladin of Souls, yes, yes.
yeah, but it's a very recurring uh
Theme,
version. That idea is very recurring throughout.
right.
I think
And so
in Curse of Chalian also has it as well, if I remember
yeah.
correct.
Yeah, that we need to act
Mhm.
and do what is right, because otherwise right won't be done. Something
Yep.
like that. But that exact
Well,
quote is in the Penrick book. Sorry, go ahead, Todd.
no, I just said well said.
Right? Oh, geez. Okay. So the second quote that is serious he's in the castle looking for the ghost of his father, hoping that he can release his father from his animal spirit. And he's contemplating parenthood. And he thinks, I might now become a father in my turn and cannot give such perfect safety. It was always an illusion. Will my own children forgive me when they find out? My kids were pretty little when I first read this book. And you do have moments when you realize, I can't keep my kids safe from everything. Todd, do you have thoughts on that? Because I feel like you should have thoughts on that.
Lots. Um, my my son is getting ready to leave on a 2-year service mission for our church to Zimbabwe,
Mm,
and I am excited for him, but paralyzed at how much he will have to do on his own. And it has caused me over this last month or so, as we've been doing all the things getting ready, and there's lots of fun things, buying luggage and trying to figure out all the pieces that are going to be necessary and figure it all out. We have a big family dinner that we're going to do, big celebrations that are connected with all of this. I mean, lots of really powerful, positive things, but it has caused me to think back on all of the different decision points where I say, did I do enough? Did I protect them enough? Did I empower them enough? Did I inspire them enough? Did I do enough of all of those pieces? And my answer is always no. I did not. I didn't protect them enough. I didn't support them enough. I am very harsh on myself on what I did and did not do. And perhaps that's why the quotes that the son had about mercy are so important for me, because as a parent, my daughter is dealing with some really big things. She's 17. Um, she's been dealing with these big things for about 4 or 5 years, and I there's nothing I can do, and
right?
she has to deal with them, and it's hard. So
Uh,
yeah, it's
yeah.
very painful and very powerful and very beautiful.
And the thing is that, like, even if you're not talking about your son going far away, you're talking about your kid walking to school. Like, something bad could happen. And but at the same time, it's that sometimes you can overprotect too, I guess. I don't
Yeah,
know. It just touches on this really complicated part of being a parent.
I like to refer to it. There are certain things that I when I talk about them, I say I'm really good at the arithmetic part. I'm not so good at the calculus part, because there is a calculus to parenting. Um, and part of that calculus is recognizing, as much as this is hard and I feel like I've failed, he has to go, and
Yep.
he has to make his own mistakes, make his own way, and hopefully it will bring us closer together and not further apart.
Oh my gosh, the first time that my kid drove to school, I just about crapped my pants. Like, I'm like, he's driving a $10,000 or 10,000 ton, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. He's driving
Big car.
a big car that he could kill himself or somebody else. Anyway, Rabbit, as a child, do you have thoughts?
I mean, like, what? How many of them are relevant? I don't know.
Cover us parents.
I mean, you guys were children at some point.
Yeah, we
So,
were.
no, but like, it's definitely it's about that illusion. No parent can promise their kid's safety with absolution. No parent can protect it. And like you said, no parent should protect them. If you protect your kid from literally everything, they're gonna grow up spoiled, they're gonna grow up a brat, they're gonna grow up thinking that they're invincible. And I would say that would being classified as having failed as a parent. But at some point, like as a kid, you think that your parent can solve everything for you up to a point. And that point, I don't know what ages it is. It's obviously different for every kid, but that is a huge just switch that happens.
Apparently, this is parenting time with Green Team. What I was going to say, it depends on. You want that. You don't want a huge switch. What you want is a switch here, a
Gradual,
switch.
right?
Yeah, gradual switches. But anyway,
But there's at some point like you just have that realization of like, oh no, my parents aren't
God.
God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you may know it subconsciously for a long time, but there is a moment for most kids when they just realize it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I remember that moment for me. And I remember that moment for me with my kids. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah. You remember when they realized it.
And I also remember when I realized it.
Mhm.
Okay. Any last thoughts from anybody?
I will say the first time I read this book, I didn't remember much. Like I it was almost blind reading this for the second time. But I think it landed much more strongly with me on this reread through. Most Bujold books are about like have increasing value on rereads, but like this one like mediocre for the first read. Like I didn't even remember the plot, most of the characters. I couldn't like stuff was happening. I'm like I just I didn't even know. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, that happened again. It was just like, oh, okay. This is a new book to me almost. But yeah, I think on a reread, it was just so much better.
I kept seeing Lady Hawk images as I was reading this book, or as I listening to this book.
The movie?
Yes.
With Michelle Pfeiffer?
With Michelle Pfeiffer and Rutger Hauer, and Matthew Broderick. When they talked
Oh, I
about
forgot he was in the movie.
yeah, they talked about the tack and the saddles and the riding, and then they talked about the deserted hovels and the hamlets that could barely stand up for the name, the rotting wood that would protect them from beasts but never from men. I mean, all these kinds of things that made me think, oh yeah, I have this and I even heard the soundtrack from Alan Parsons Project of the song is called Mama Gamma, of riding along, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally can see.
Rabbit's right. It benefits from a reread. And
Still
even though what?
It's still one of her worst books. That's still a compliment because it's a Bujold book, but it's still one of her worst.
I mean, she's still my queen, and it's only a 4-star. And by the way, Soul, you say you've never been on an episode with me rating books high because you're missing the best episodes. So thanks so much for joining us today. You can find us on Twitter at Green Team Pod. Please consider supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. A link to the Legendarium Discord can be found at legendarium.com. The music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. Thank you, Craig, for lending us a little corner of your empire. And a shout out to Horizon Brave for starting this all. For Colonel Rabbit and Todd Winty, I'm Little Red Book. Good night.
Bye.
Say goodbye, Todd.
Goodbye, Tom.
You're still on mute. You're still on mute.
Still. No, you actually. I think your mic may have cut out somehow. I thought because you're muting, unmuting Discord, but we're still not hearing you. It worked once.
It did.
Now Todd's settings are irrevocably changed.
Oh,
will never work it again.
This is amazing.
Nothing again.
No. And I thought I was a boomer.
Hear me now.
Hey,
Yes.
there it is.
Woo!
Yeah, it has everything to do with if certain software when I try to mess with my settings, the computer sits down and says, "No, you're not allowed to touch any of these," and leaves me alone. So we were talking about my skills with technology. No, we were talking about information dumps. I was